Good morning, everybody. Oh, go on. Yeah, sorry. It's 10 o'clock and the inquiry is resumed. This is an inquiry into an appeal made by Dido Properties Limited against the decision of Buckinghamshire Council to refuse planning permission for production space and supporting buildings for screen-based media and associated services and industries at land adjacent to the A4155, Marlow Road and Westhorpe Farm Lane, Marlow. I don't think there is anyone new today, is there? So I don't need to introduce myself. There could be people online. So I'm Kate McDonald, the inspector. This is the 10th day of the inquiry. Usual reminders, please, mobile phones, other electronic devices switch to silent. We'll aim to break for lunch around 1 p.m, suitable mid-morning, mid-afternoon comfort breaks. No fire drills planned, fire exit at the back of the room, toilets there and there. Up to yet, I've heard opening statements from the main parties. I've heard evidence from the appellant's master planner and scheme designer. I've heard from interested parties. There has been a roundtable session on ecology and noise and the preliminary session for conditions and the planning obligation. I've heard from the landscape witnesses and I've heard need evidence from the council and the Rule 6 and 2 of the appellant's witnesses, and I've heard the rest of the Rule 6's evidence as well. Today we'll continue to hear the appellant's evidence on need. Any procedural or housekeeping matters?
One very important.
Oh, thank you.
We join you in that, madam.
Yes. Happy birthday.
My daughter did say this morning, are they going to sing happy birthday? I was like, I don't think so.
We can do.
Happy at an appropriate moment.
Thank you. There are brownies. Harvey's the guardian of the brownies. I made them at the weekend, but hopefully they should still be quite nice. So you can help yourselves to brownies. As the inspector, I can bring brownies. Nobody else can give me things. So, okay. Aside from that, any other procedural or housekeeping matters? No. Okay. Then, Mr. Bird, would you like to start your cross-examination, please?
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yep.
Can I just get confirmation, Mr. Dix's benefit on the arrangements for the site visit?
Yes.
The highway site visit. As I recall, we're going to try and fit it in tomorrow morning. Yeah. Just Mr. Dix has sent me a note saying that we need to get onto him because the site visit is programmed for Monday. So we'll have to confirm that he needs to be here tomorrow at 8:30. Well, he says,
go on.
And this is, he says that it might be worth being there by 8.
Okay, that's fine.
Because of that, we understand it. The crossing is used by school children significantly from 8. So it might be worth, I'm sorry to get you up earlier, but I know it's not, it might need to be 8. I think it to be fully effective, could we do 8 till 9:30?
Yep, that's fine with me.
We'll confirm with Mr. Tester.
So meet at the where the crossing point is.
If yes, Britannia pubs. Yes, that's right. Mr. Dix has suggested the Britannia pub.
Will it be open?
Early start.
That's Mr. Dix.
I mean, I've had Prosecco delivered this morning, so.
Mr. Dix, Mr. Tester, let's make sure and don't tell anyone, but let's turn left instead of right and go into the Britannia. So yes, so 8 o'clock at the Britannia car park.
No problem,
because that's literally next door to the crossing.
That's absolutely fine. We can do that.
Brilliant. Sorry.
Thank you. Any core docs?
Madam, I think probably we'll pick them up as we go along, but it's principally Mr. Davis's proof and appendices.
No problem.
A couple of other references, but we'll pick those up if we don't mind as we go through. Morning, Mr. Davis.
Good morning.
Now, as you confirmed yesterday, you had no involvement, did you, in the scheme until I think August of last year?
Correct.
Yes. To your knowledge, had the appellant commissioned any assessment of the quantitative and qualitative need for additional stage space before your involvement?
I'm aware of the work that was undertaken by Volterra.
Right. So other than the economic case for development, you're not aware of any other work?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, it's not to say it doesn't exist, but not to my knowledge.
So you haven't seen it if it does exist?
Correct.
Okay. Now, as far as the scheme itself is concerned, its evolution, as we heard from Mr. Pryor, starts in about 2021, 2022, doesn't it?
Yes.
Good. And just some other general points. It's not your case, is it, that studios and new studio stage space outside the West London cluster is or are unviable, is it?
Sorry, could you rephrase the
Yeah.
question?
It's not your case, is it, that studios and or new stage space, studios outside the West London cluster are unviable?
My point yesterday was that there are examples where studios are viable in the area outside of the West London cluster, but there are a lot of examples where they've had central government or local government support or longer term investment.
Yeah, so the answer is no, it's not your evidence and you can add your rider. Okay, that's the
Correct.
Thank you. And if we go to page 38 of your proof of evidence, please.
Sorry, just to state, just to make things easier, I'm on a PDF as well. So if we do go beyond my proof, if you could quote the
Yeah,
PDF
I
number, that'd be great.
generally do.
Thank
That's
you.
fine. But I'm saying, I'm going first to your proof, please.
Yep.
Page 38.
Section 7.
Yeah. And within that to 7.1.6.
Yep.
You expressly make the point there, don't you, that and indeed I think you criticise Lambert Smith Hampton's December 2022 report because you say, as I understand it, they failed to take account of the fact that one of the main global creators and the largest studio equipment company are based way outside the western limit of the West London cluster and not having a problem with it, don't you?
So the context in that comment, yes, factually, you're right. I do state that. The context is that, like with any studio situation, there's background information. So you may be aware that MBS are the largest global provider of studio space, studio management and equipment. They opened up a depot to distribute across the UK there. And there was effectively a corporate agreement between them to manage Apple's UK portfolio, which is how that arose. How that arose. It's also an industrial estate, not a studio facility.
No, but the point you were making there is you don't have to be, and indeed the industry does not require a West London cluster, firstly to function, and secondly to function successfully. That is the point you were making, isn't it?
The point I was making was that there are isolated examples, and in that particular instance, that was for a specific short-term production requirement, not a long-term sophisticated studio play.
We'll come back to one or two of the examples in due course. Equally, it's not your case, is it, the grade B studios are unviable or incapable of offering good quality production space to productions, is it?
It's not. Again, the context as to how the sector has arisen over the last 100+ years is very much a make, do and mend approach. People have taken spaces in all sorts of facilities, but when you really boil down to and understand what the production requirements are and speak to the people who actually commission these productions, it's undesirable to be split across multiple sites in inferior facilities. They've just had to do it because there wasn't anything available at that point in the market.
Well, forgive me, as far as grade B, let's just focus on grade B. It would be wrong, wouldn't it, to characterise grade B as being unfit for 21st century production as a generality?
As a generality, yes.
Good. Equally, it would be wrong to characterise temporary sound stages, given the improved availability of high quality temporary sound stages, as being incapable of accommodating 21st century production standards, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Yes. And I think you make that point, page 18 of your proof, para 410. I think you expressly refer to span, tack and serious stages, don't you?
Yes.
Yes. And we know, don't we, and you know, that, for example, Amazon and at Bray have erected, inverted commas, temporary sound stages to accommodate their production of high-end TV, don't we?
They did to respond to that requirement. What they subsequently then did was work with the then owner to obtain a formal planning consent, and they will and are about to start building out permanent buildings.
Equally, we know that phase 1 at Shinfield relied on temporary soundstage space, didn't it, as the pump primer?
It was to capture the high levels of demand, specifically a Disney requirement at that point in time under a temporary planning consent, which then was formalised, and they then built out the remainder of the development.
Then if we go to page 23 of your proof, please, and 4.33, where you deal with Longcross, which you've included in the grade B stock, haven't you?
Yes.
And the north site at Longcross is let on an MLA to Netflix, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. And if you could take up core document 13.32, which is one of the House of Commons Select Committee reports of the oral evidence.
1332.
13.30. Oh, it's this same Marlow Greenbelt is the section 13.
Yes. Yep. The DCMS hearing. Yep.
Yeah, and go within that, please, to PDF 20.
Yep.
Which is a response by Benjamin King, and this is an answer to question 377, as you can see on the previous page, if you wanted to look at the context. But he refers there to taking long-term leases of Shepperton and Longcross, doesn't he?
Yes.
He also, in the second paragraph, refers there to the sizable capital expenditure investment at Longcross, which he says has effectively brought it up to a very 21st century specification, refurbishing all the stages, building new sound stages, refurbishing office space and workshop space to spec it for pretty much anything we might want to make there in the future. Got any evidence to dispute that assessment?
No.
No.
But just to add to that, I don't quite understand the point, because that reinforces the fact that Netflix took a long-term commitment and then invested their own money, significant money, building sound stages to get it to a requisite level.
Yeah.
There are a number of buildings on that site which are brand new buildings.
Yes, absolutely. And they have invested in them using existing studio site to improve the facilities to what appears to be grade A quality.
To build new buildings at
Yeah.
considerable expense.
At grade A quality.
Yeah, that's fit for their occupancy, but they're still having to spend a significant amount of money to build buildings, which is normally then the responsibility of an owner.
Yeah, but we know what they've done. We've seen that. And this is an industry which operates, doesn't it, on a cluster level. That's a point you make strongly.
Yes.
And it operates on a cluster level within which both grade A and B buildings can and do in tandem provide space for production of all sizes and budgets, doesn't it?
It works as an ecosystem, yes. So if you go back through the chronology of the studio cluster, the larger studios, the Pinewoods, the Sheppertons, etc., who've been more established, have always been deemed the centre of excellence, the larger scale facilities. And then what tends to happen is production traffic gets pushed either as overflow or as dedicated sites to some of the smaller studios.
Or some of the smaller productions use the smaller studios.
Correct.
Or some of the smaller studios have a particular facility which a production requires.
Yes, depending on the nuance of a production, because they're all individual.
Or a particular director wants to use a specific studio.
That sometimes is a factor, yes.
Yeah, good. And just put this in context, if we go to the Knight Frank report, page 48, did you commission the Knight Frank report?
The client commissioned the report and I inputted and had coordinated with Knight Frank.
Right, so you agree with its substance.
Sorry, which page of the PDF?
Page 48 of it's the paper version I'm looking at, but it's paragraph 3.2.14.
Sorry,
3.2.14.
Page 48, yes.
Yeah. And there we can see in the first two sentences how Knight Frank assess the ecosystem as operating in terms of the role that smaller facilities play, which is consistent with what you've just said, together with the rider they go on to in terms of the size.
Yes.
Good. Now, in terms of the cluster, you describe it in your proof in various ways, don't you? We go to 2.29 of your proof. You refer to by far and away the largest cluster in the UK being London and the South East, don't you? That's page 10.
Oh, wait a second, sorry. Sorry, which paragraph on page 10?
2.29, page 10.
Yep.
Yeah. When you were giving your evidence in chief yesterday, you referred to Belfast, and you then made the point that it's London and the South East, which is the natural place for new sites for studio stage space to happen.
Yes, it is the epicenter.
Yeah. And if we go to paragraph 4.6 of your proof, please.
Sorry, which page?
That's page 18.
Yep.
You again refer there to the amount of stage space in London and the South East, don't you?
Yes.
And 4.4, we go back a page 17, you there stress Greater London.
Yes.
Yeah. All in the context of how the cluster stroke ecosystem operates.
The way that it works, and again, forgive me for different phraseology, is the West London cluster acts as the beating heart. That's where the majority of the infrastructure companies are, the equipment companies, the major studios are. The wider London area, obviously, from an international perspective, gets often referred to because of a variety of things on an international scale. It's like referring to Burbank in Los Angeles versus Los Angeles. They're the same city. It's a different approach.
Right. Can you take up the Volterra economic case for development, which is core document 1.234, please?
Core document
1.234. So it's in the first file of core docs.
Yes.
Go to that. I've only got paper copy, but it's page 45 I wanted to go to.
Yes, with the chart. Yeah.
Yeah, which is the final search area referred to by Volterra, which has their definition of the West London cluster on it, doesn't it?
Yes.
So it extends into central London, includes central London, and extends out to just beyond Wickham and beyond Maidenhead.
Yes.
Yes. Did it, at the point this was written, extend to Shinfield?
Not according to this map, no.
No. And Shinfield, as I understand it, was designed to attract tentpole productions and high-end TV.
Correct.
And competing for precisely the addressable market identified by Mr. Chodorovich.
Yes.
And whose funding relied on a business plan, presumably to that effect.
Yes.
Which you endorsed.
For the lender, yes.
Yes. At what stage of the process did you endorse the business plan?
Without breaching confidentiality, we were instructed at the point of the temporary buildings, as you refer to, being built, right, with a contract in place to Disney, which actually was subcontracted to Netflix. So there was a proof of concept, and there was hard evidence that the area was attractive to production companies.
Yeah. What Shinfield shows is that we're not here dealing, are we, with a cluster with any recognised fixed boundaries?
But I think there's, technically that's a factually correct statement. I think what's useful context for the inquiry is the way that it's being referred to at this hearing, and actually how it gets approached in reality by the production world is very much driven by the cluster of the major studios in West London. It's principally Leavesden, Pinewood, Shepperton, and a couple of others. Yeah. The relevance to this inquiry of inner London studios like Twickenham and Ealing, which are technically in West London, is, in my view, irrelevant because they talk to a completely different market.
But what the Knight Frank report shows, and we can go, if you like, to page 45 of the Knight Frank report shows, is the cluster has expanded, not just slightly, but significantly over time as studios have been developed.
Sorry, which page is that again?
Page 45.
Oh, sorry, PDF.
There's the West London cluster recent growth and expansion. It's in section 3.
Sorry, bear with me.
Page 45, madam.
Is that page 45 of the PDF?
No, it's the paper copy, page 45, and it.
Thank you, Matthew.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. Shows the extent of the expansion of the West London cluster from the period 1990 to 2024, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And in terms of Eastbrook, which you said by definition can't fall within the West London cluster because it's in Dagenham and East London, fair to say, and it's not your contention, is it, that Eastbrook is anything other than grade A space, is it?
Correct.
Good. And similarly, as I understand it, no dispute that the Leavesden expansion, the Pinewood expansion, and the Sunset Studios development, if built, would all be grade A space, wouldn't they?
Correct.
Yes. If we go back to your proof, page 20. You've got the table of the planned developments.
Yep.
Yeah. In terms of Pinewood expansion, that would be 21 stages at 600,000 square feet.
Yes.
Sunset Studios, again, 21 stages, 470,000 square feet.
Correct.
Leavesden, 11 stages, 308,000 square feet.
Yes.
To which we can add Shinfield, 18 stages, which is 466,200. Agree?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, good. And Eastbrook, 12 stages, 251,600.
Correct.
Neither Shinfield nor Eastbrook contributed materially, did they, to production spend in 2024?
There was some production traffic in Shinfield, Ghostbusters 3, and a handful of other, the Faraway Tree. So, you know, it certainly wasn't empty.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. That's why I put my question very carefully. It did not contribute materially to production spend in 2024. There was certainly a lot of capacity at Shinfield in 2024.
It wasn't full.
Yeah. Do you know what its utilization was?
Not specifically. Well, not that I could reference in the appeal anyway.
So we'll see 2 points there. Do you know what its utilization was?
I have a good indication, but I'm not under permission to state it.
Okay, fine. So just from the plan supply, there's plan provision for 83 sound stages is what those all add up to. And some 2.095 million square feet.
Using your analysis, that's correct. I think the context that's most appropriate for this inquiry is actually the deliverability of any of those projects, and also the desirability of those projects based on geography. Being frank, just as it was with Shinfield when it first opened, there was a lot of skepticism in the market because of where it was. Eastbrook has got similar challenges, possibly more difficult challenges because it is so far east compared to where, frankly, the rest of the major studio infrastructure is. And we discussed briefly yesterday about certain studios having either paused or potentially looking to pivot for their own potentially unique business reasons.
Yeah, but we'll come back to Eastbrook in due course. As far as the 2.095 million figure is concerned, can you go to the Knight Frank report, please?
Which
page 32, and I'm again hard copy.
Sorry, maybe paragraph number.
It's 2.5.26.
Yes.
They identify in 2.5.26 that at peak capacity utilization rate, there was £1 billion of production spend for an adjusted, inflation adjusted figure of 712,000 square feet, wasn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. You put 2.095 million over 721,000 square feet. You will effectively have £3 billion worth of production spend potentially supported by the pipeline, don't you?
What?
Yes. If you put 2.095 billion, sorry, over the 0.721 or 721,000 square feet figure, it would support £3 billion worth of expenditure. Yes?
Yes. I'm not going to question your maths.
Well, I hope it's right, but if I'm wrong, someone will come back and tell me, no doubt. But that's right, isn't it?
I'll trust your mathematics.
Good.
The context that's useful again on this is that it is without an MLA, it's impossible for a studio to be at 100% occupancy. So if we look slightly further back across the whole of the studio portfolio pre-streamer boom, most studios on average were about 70% occupied. Taking out the unusual behavior of the strike recovery, most studios today would see full occupancies being somewhere around 80 to 85%, because naturally between productions you have to have some downtime anyway. There's what we call functional void. So in reality, any studio at the moment that's got 60, 70% capacity is doing well. Well, one thing I can say, because it's publicly stated, is Shinfield is looking to be 80% occupied this year. And so I would very much encourage people to look at this from the perspective of being full doesn't mean being full in the context of other sectors or other industries.
No, but even if we take that, if you go to 3.4.3 on page 59 of the Knight Frank report, 3.4.3, madam, on page 59. Where they've done the same exercise specifically for the West London cluster, relying on data from 2017 to 2019. Inflation adjusted, 836,000 square feet for every 1 billion of production spend in the last line. You put 836 into the sum, so 2.095 divided by 836, you're still at 2.5 billion pounds worth of additional expenditure, aren't you? Allowing for, no doubt, the operation of normal vacancy.
But this is assuming that every single one of those schemes in your analysis is actually delivered
Well,
and is
answer the
delivered in
question,
totality.
Financial rider. Right, that is the result of the sum, isn't it?
If we follow that mathematical equation, which I believe your maths is correct, it would come to that conclusion. But the reality is there is significant doubt about whether some or all of those studios will come forward and in what format, over what time period. And I think referencing Mr. Chodorowicz's evidence yesterday and other conversations in the preceding days, there's no doubt that everyone at the appeal is on the same viewpoint around the growth of the sector year on year.
Well, that's what I'm putting to you. If you take Mr. Chodorowicz's firm's North City's forecast of £7 billion worth of production spend in 2028 and add either 3 or 2.5 billion, you would have space to support at least £9.5 billion worth of production spend, wouldn't you? Taking you well beyond 2028 on Mr. Chodorowicz's own evidence.
You using that analysis,
Yeah,
your maths is probably correct. But just to go back to the point I was making about what of your pipeline is actually tangibly deliverable, there's a significant question mark. The only two that are really deliverable, in my market opinion, would be the Pinewood Extension and Sunset Studios, because of the reasons we've talked about. There are significant doubts over Sunset Studios. We've already seen a press release about Pinewood looking to pivot put a much more valuable data center or data centers on their site. So the erosion of that theoretical pipeline is evident for everybody to see.
forgive me, Mr. Sorry, I thought you had. Sorry, it's my hearing. Apologies.
Not to mention, I think it's important to cross-reference pipeline with existing supply. We've kind of skirted around the edges of how many studios of a grade A standard are actually capable of offering adequate supply to the third-party market, i.e. aren't locked down by MLAs or aren't owned by production companies. And they are quite literally Shinfield Studios, and which as we talked about is targeting 80%, i.e. full capacity in 2025, and Eastbrook, which is, as we said, significantly out of the West London cluster. So that leaves you with a net number of about 466,000 square feet of potential market availability.
Just so we're clear, I only put to you grade A space.
Yep.
You haven't mentioned Leavesden in that answer, have you? You're not suggesting that isn't.
It's owned by a production company who've stated they're going to.
And it's supporting production spend, isn't it?
It is, but it's also driving jobs, and it's because it's owned by Warner Brothers, and they're putting their Marvel portfolio through there.
And in terms of the MLAs, do you know, as a matter of fact, whether any of the existing MLAs allow for subletting?
Some of them do.
Right. Which ones do?
That's confidential.
Are there any which don't?
Not off the top of my head. Possibly one, possibly two.
Well, possibly one or two, might not. Is that what you're saying?
Possibly. I don't look factually. I haven't got visibility in all of those MLA agreements.
Right. Then, coming back to Eastbrook, then, which you mentioned, I said we would come back to. You accept, as I understand your evidence, and this is paragraph 4.13 on page 18. That Eastbrook is a true competing supply when assessing the Marlow Film Studios proposal, don't you? Expressly recognise that. True competing supply.
Well, in the terms, and this again, this is where reality is slightly different, i.e. the way the market performs is slightly different to how the inquiry is set up, in the fact that in terms of quality, across the UK, it's very easy to be able to say these are grade A studios because they, in my view, they sit kind of head and shoulders above everything else. So from a build perspective, from a modernity perspective, from a scale perspective, Eastbrook would be a grade A studio. But the fundamental point and the fundamental kind of challenge for it is its location.
Well, we can see what you say in your proof. In terms of location, Barking and Dagenham are already home, aren't they, to Apple Studios at Wharf? Sorry, Apple at Wharf Studios.
Which is another MBS facility who also have control of Eastbrook.
Yeah, so it's already used by a production platform, isn't it, Apple? And as I understand your evidence, there is at least some speculation within the industry that Apple might actually take an MLA at Dagenham.
The speculation, it certainly hasn't materialised, and there's other things that I'm privy to which I can't comment on today, which may suggest otherwise.
Well, I'm only referring to what you say in your proof. Yes. As far as Knight Frank are concerned, if we can go to their report again, and on paper page 70. And it's section 3.6 of the Knight Frank report. So on page 70. Marlowe's position within the West London cluster. Do you see that?
Sorry, bear with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam.
Yes, I'm on page 70.
Good. This is where Knight Frank appraise Marlowe, Shinfield and Eastbrook in terms of their, as it were, number of metrics which they say are relevant to assessing the position within the cluster, don't they?
Sorry, I've lost the paragraph number.
It's the section as a whole, section 3.6 is what it does. You've read it, I assume.
Of course.
Yeah. And we can go over the page 71, you can see table 17, industry workforce accessible within 30, 60 and 90 minutes.
Yep.
Table 18, percentage of the workforce within 30, 60 and 90-minute drive times.
Yep.
Yeah. We can note, can't we, that as far as Knight Frank are concerned, Eastbrook performs better against the relevant metrics chosen than Shinfield, doesn't it?
So this is another example where statistical analysis actually is different from reality.
Well, do you want to answer the question and then you can add your rider, please?
If you look at the data in isolation, it does support your viewpoint.
Yes.
However, given that the majority of the people involved in TV and film live in and around West London, the challenge that will be interesting to observe as to whether those people culturally will be willing to commute to East London on a daily basis, given the the traffic problems that we have.
That, of course, assumes that you're exclusively reliant on the existing workforce, doesn't it?
Well, that's an interesting observation because,
Well, no, answer the
yes.
question, add your rider. Good.
yes, it is. But also it depends on which time period you want to assess this, because you're assuming that all of a sudden the workforce will magically arise tomorrow to fulfill a studio that's just opened.
I'm not. It's precisely not. And you will have heard that if you've been observing the inquiry to date. One of the issues raised by Lambert Smith Hutton, as raised in the evidence before Parliament, is that there is a lag between studio space and skills or upskilling the necessary crew, isn't there?
The disconnect, yes.
Yeah.
At those inquiries, the disconnect is that there is no resident crew base of any level in East London or any of the counties east of London.
Well, and you've read Miss Evans' proof of evidence, presumably,
Yes.
and Miss Waite's proof of evidence.
Yes.
Both of whom identify there is already an existing skills shortage.
Across the whole of the UK, yes.
Yes, so we're going to have to train thousands of additional people in order to support stage-based development. We won't
overall,
be
yes.
relying, will we, in order to support growth on the existing crews living where they are presently living?
Sorry.
Will we?
Well, again, it depends over what time period you want to assess this. If you're talking about how do we fulfill TV and film productions from now going forward, there are inherently many more challenges to growing a crew base out of East London than there are effectively piggybacking on the 100 years worth of experience of West London.
In terms of those challenges, they and respective challenges, they turn on a variety of factors, not least the availability of those not presently in employment, don't they?
Sorry, could you rephrase that?
Yes. The respective challenges between respective areas in terms of training up people include the extent to which there are those presently not in employment, i.e. the extent to which there is available labour.
So I still don't follow. If you could probably rephrase that?
Yes. In terms of the West London cluster, as I understand it, it's the appellant's position that there is a shortage of skilled crew. Yes?
Generally, yes.
They will have to either train people
Yep.
who are in existing employment, or they will have to train people who are presently unemployed.
Or people leaving education at 16, 18.
Absolutely. Yep. Yes, so various pipeline supplies. Yeah. And in terms of training people who are unemployed, clearly where there are more people who are unemployed, there is an advantage, isn't there, in terms of both the ability to find a labour supply, but also the economic advantages for that area.
But it's not as easy just to make that point. It's retraining people, as we know, is a difficult topic because it depends on the individual person, the caliber of the training facility, the wider infrastructure, throw into that education. There's a myriad of factors. To start from a zero base, I mean, I'll use South Wales as an example. That took 10 to 15 years from the decline of the steel industry to retrain people in manual labour to be useful in the film and TV industry. So that's the kind of time horizon we're talking about for East London.
But it's the same time horizon in West London. We're talking about additional tens of thousands of additional people, aren't we?
Not exclusive to just West London. We're talking about the 20,000 people across the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, moving on, separate topic. As far as the Marlow Film Studios development is concerned, your client is seeking, and indeed, as I understand it, you advocate a phased approach, don't you, to the development?
I'm not advocating it. The point that the client is committed to building this out as a single phase. The point that I make in my proof is that from my experience, and this varies dramatically based on who the funder is, who the parties are behind it, because frankly, everybody's got a different perspective on their return profile. Some of the projects that I've been involved with, using Shinfield as an example, was phased.
Well, forgive me. Go to 8.6 of your proof, page 42. Impact of financing on phasing. You tell us there in terms, there hasn't been an example in the UK yet where a purely new build studio of scale has been built out in a single phase, don't you?
That's also a facet of there haven't been many totally new studios built.
All of them have been phased, haven't they?
Well, if you dissect it further, if you look at Pinewood, that's phased over 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
What we've seen is symptomatic of the fact that the sector has really evolved and kicked on in the last let's call talking round numbers, post 2016, 10 years.
But the point you make, as I understood it on page 35 of your proof, in 6.43 on page 35 of your proof, was that one of the advantages of the design here was that it has been designed so that it can be phased, as I understand it, east first, west second,
Yep.
so that the demand can be tested, just as it had to be at Shinfield.
Yes, well, it's the point I was making there was actually about that's what any intelligent master planner would do on any larger scale commercial development. It's designed frankly, my personal view and professional view is that any large scale development should be intelligently designed to be flexible, because frankly it's about trying to second guess what will happen in the economy over the delivery period. What, from an operational perspective, was very smart about this is the fact that it is designed so that one production can come in and be filming whilst other parts of the scheme are being finished off.
Yeah, well, we can see the phasing allows and what it been put for them. Then I think just a couple of other additional points, please. We go to page 29 of your proof. And paragraph 6.2.
Yep.
You tell us there that as far as film studios is concerned, they also require a much higher rate of parking spaces than typical industrial sites, don't you?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, why is it they require a much higher rate of parking spaces than a typical industrial site?
Well, simply because you're having 400, 800 crew shooting there. I mean,
But why does that require a much higher rate of parking space?
because the way that the sector typically behaves is to drive. However, we are seeing a real push for more sustainable modes of transport and public transport. That one of the facets of this scheme is that you're not far from the train station. Going back to the point I made in my examination in chief about global production companies driving the sustainability agenda, that is only going to become increasingly important.
Yes, but we're agreed, aren't we? As far as the crew base, that is almost entirely freelance.
Well, that's the way the sector works.
Yes,
Everybody's
engaged
freelance.
on a sorry,
That's the way the sector works.
and engaged on a project by project basis.
Correct.
So any day of any week, they may be working in multiple different locations on any given day.
Yeah, it's not as haphazard as perhaps you've articulated, but yes, it's relatively fluid.
Yeah. Okay. Then think just page 9 of your proof, please. And this is on the issue of business rate relief, which you touch on in paragraph 2.23. Where you say there's a specific list of studios to which the business rate relief will apply to.
Mm.
There is as yet no formal scheme for the relief. It's been announced, hasn't it? It's not actually in force.
Correct.
Yes. And there isn't, is there, a specific named list of studios? A studio will qualify, providing effectively the Inland Revenue assess it as being a film studio.
There may possibly be a draft list.
Right. You have a copy of that list?
I have seen a copy of the list, of the draft list.
Would you be able to produce it for the inquiry?
On balance, it would be unlikely. because I don't,
Well, whose list is it?
I'm not at liberty to say.
It's not a government list. It's not the HMRC list.
No.
No. So was this some informal list, is it?
It's a consultant list.
Right, because you say that the relief would typically only include the premium facilities or those heritage studios which have been a backbone of the sector for decades.
Well, I mean,
where is that supported by?
The business rates situation is on this particular point is evolving, and the draft guidance is that any new dedicated facility would be nominated and added to this relief scheme.
It doesn't. What I'm really asking you is where in the scheme can you provide evidence where in the scheme it says it would only include premium facilities or heritage studios?
Sorry, say that again.
I'm using your words from your proof here, 2.23, page 9. The relief, you effectively say, doesn't apply to every studio. There's a specific named list which typically includes the premium facilities or those heritage studios which have been the backbone of the sector for decades.
Yes, sorry. The reason why I put the word studio in inverted commas is because obviously we've got to recognise that the wider supply of studios in the UK involves industrial conversions, temporary interim facilities, etc., etc. And from my understanding, the way that the business rates relief for studios is going to fall is those sort of adapted facilities are unlikely to qualify for this relief.
Right, so I don't think there's any dispute. As far as your understanding of the relief is concerned, it will apply to any
Dedicated
facility which is identified and assessed by HMRC as being a film studio. Yes?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, madam. A little early, which is the only birthday present I can give you, madam. 9 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. Do you want a quick comfort break?
Yeah,
before-
2 minutes.
Yeah, and then need to swap anyway. So should we take 15 minutes? We'll come back at 11:05. We're adjourned until then. Thank you.